Hello, everybody. As Lon quickly sits back down, I'm Andrew Dalton. Welcome to this week's In Search of Tomorrow watch party for Star Trek III, The Search for Spock. Will Spock return? Welcome, Lon. Do you think Spock will be back with us?
I have a good feeling about it.
I hope so too. I hope so too. So thank you for joining us. This is going to be a lot of fun. We were just discussing how much we love this movie and all the Trek movies. Hello to our chat in Discord who are joining us again. Wonderful to have you all with us, and our fans on YouTube and Facebook and Twitch. Wherever you see us, it's great to have you with us. Okay, so today's sync point will be just as the Paramount logo fades in. But while you're all getting yourself sorted, Lon, can you tell me how you feel about this film when you first saw it, that kind of thing?
Oh, wow. This one definitely goes back to my childhood. And my dad was always a big Star Trek enthusiast. So after the second movie was such a big hit, everyone was anticipating this third one. And I would say it hit all the right emotional notes that it needed to, back in the day. I think it's a bit of an underrated film.
I think so.
And yeah, it's it establishes a number of tropes that we continue to see in reiterations of the Star Trek IP, and just a fantastic movie that and Christopher Lloyd doesn't get enough credit for this particular Klingon villain that, again, I think set the bar for what a Klingon villain should be.
I think it's also worth noting that what we're seeing here is possibly even more influential throughout the Star Trek franchise as it goes along, right down to everything we see in Star Trek going forward for the next, this is a 40-year-old movie now, is it? 30 to 40 years old?
Crazy.
And it's influenced Trek because the Klingons, the Trek culture, the uniforms for the Klingons, the whole Klingon culture was evolved from this. So it's a really big thing. But anyway, we're going to discuss this as we get on with the movie. So on the count of 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, press play. $37. Thank you, Sparky John.
Opens with a recap of the end of the second film.
That's right.
This was common back then. They would, and it's one of the unique things about this series is how it sort of it's one long story.
Yeah, that's why we did these as part of the Summer of Popcorn. We've already in the Sands of Time we've redone the Voyage Homes. We've done the Voyage Home, so we didn't choose to redo it at this time, but we did want to do sort of 2, 3, and then maybe we will revisit 4. We want to do them as they are their own trilogy within the Star Trek movies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a bit unfortunate the TNG didn't quite pull off the same level of resonance that the original films managed to capture. But I still really like those ones too.
Oh, definitely. While we're going through this and we're getting into place, let's talk about the newer Star Trek movies. The latter of the next generation, the Trek movies and the Next Generation movies. This movie is incredibly important in that we wouldn't have Star Trek V in its current shape and form if not for this movie and Star Trek IV, because Leonard Nimoy and William Shatner had something in their contracts called a Most Favored Nations clause, which meant that they got paid the same money, and any perks that one got, the other one got. They said it was wonderful because when it came to negotiation, they were able to get their lawyers to basically play off against each other and give each other insider information to make sure they got a wonderful deal from Paramount. But due to the fact that Nimoy was invited back to direct 3 and 4, at the wrap party for 4, someone at the studio made the really, really daft idea of saying to Shatner, well, you could direct number 5 if you want. Yeah.
And immediately he was like, okay, we're doing God.
Yeah. If only that guy choked on a crab puff at the at the party instead of suggesting to Shatner. We might have had something different, but then we got very much back on track with the excellent Star Trek VI.
Yeah. Star Trek VI is an excellent entry. And then it gets a little rocky with Generations, but I still like Generations. I thought it was
I like Generations. I think unfortunately the Next Generation movies kind of do this. They kind of go there, then they go really up with First Contact, and then it's a very steep drop.
Yeah.
First Contact is phenomenal. I would say it's possibly. Oh wow!
This is the villain from Insurrection.
I bet there were a lot of those spare in the stores.
The obscurity factor was like irresistible, you know. Rafo is his name.
That's that's interesting. It's rare. It's cool, but rare. But so yeah, I mean, Insurrection was, let's be honest, it was an episode of Next Generation, and it was a middling episode.
Right. It was like it's an okay entry, you know, like it just felt like a TV episode. But it had a feature film budget.
Yeah.
I think the X-Files sequel also kind of felt like an episode in theaters.
And then we got Nemesis, which was just a mess.
Nemesis is it's a beautiful mess.
Yeah,
you know, because it's so stylized, and they're going for these real particular color tones and things. And Tom Hardy as Picard, as the alternate Picard. I think a lot of people don't realize that's Tom Hardy, one of his earlier big budget roles.
That's right.
I've watched it a few times. I've never really loved it, but I really appreciated the nods to it in the Picard series.
Yeah, they made something good of a bad situation, I think would be the best way I'd describe it.
Yeah, and I'm really excited to see what they do with season 2 and 3 of the Picard series.
Yeah, but I think it's probably worth saying to some of our viewers here, we do have a production team member from the Kelvinverse with us today. That's
right. I did a couple days on Star Trek, the reboot.
So the 2009 movie.
Yeah, the 2009 film. I was on set for the Iowa production stuff when they had Kirk as a kid stealing the car, getting chased down by the cop in the hover cycle. So I was on set for that and got to see how that was all executed. It was shot over in an area called Bakersfield, California, and there must have been a fresh dispersing of stinky soil food, or whatever you want to call it. And it just the whole area smelled awful. So you would never know that by watching any of the material. But I thought that was a fun movie, and I think they did a good job of kind of recapturing the magic of the original cast. The sequels didn't quite do it for me. I always, Star Trek should be about like moving forward. So I think they struggle with that when we're trying to be nostalgic about the original series and yet still moving forward in a narrative sense.
Yeah.
So prequel stuff are kind of hard for me to deal with the Star Trek universe.
So something, again, this is something I've never liked about these uniforms here that we're seeing, and maybe this is why they got rid of the uniforms as they did in the Star Trek universe eventually. The flap opening on the front like that, is that equivalent to having your tie sort of, half undone around your neck?
Yeah, that's like the casual. It's open, so it feels a little bit more relaxed.
But what I don't understand is why have a big bright colored piece of fabric that's a different color inside where you can't see it when it's closed, unless there's some kind of protocol where you have it undone, or you're allowed to have it optionally undone. Because at times, sometimes you see it, like Sulu and the other bridge officers have it done up properly. It just seems a bit of an odd uniform choice.
It is odd. It is odd, especially when you start looking at it and the way it kind of flaps around on Kirk. Yeah, that's funny. I never really thought about it.
It does seem as an odd thing. But anyway, so we've got some cool things here. That's Phil Morris we're seeing there, who's a great voice actor who we've seen in a lot of stuff. And we've got to say, Lon here, big shout out and hello to Carla's mother, Carla, our producer's mother, who is now a Trek fan. Wonderful to have you with us yet again, Carla's mom.
Welcome, Carla's mom. Yeah, Star Trek is one of those things that really brings people together. You know, it's almost on par with like a religion. Oh, you're in the family. You know Trek, because I think some people are too intimidated by it because it's so huge compared to something like Star Wars. The original series we were talking about earlier, how it maybe hasn't aged as well as some people hope, but in other ways it has such a charm about it. But having grown up with the movies first, the series always kind of served as like an extension of adventures for me as a kid. I remember thinking they were little mini movies, not quite as well produced.
And we're just hearing some amazing work from Michael Okuda, I believe it is, who came up with the Klingon language, who developed a true language, which is starting to be properly fleshed out here for the first time in the Star Trek universe. And that's right. A Targ, and that's his pet Targ as well, which again, this is all the building blocks of everything we see referenced and spoken about, etc., in the Star Trek movies as in the Star Trek universe as we go on.
That's right.
Now, this is something I do find interesting, but it's again something I think there is an explanation for. We can see that the Genesis footage is now, instead of being introduced by Carol Marcus, Kirk is now introducing it.
Right.
And we see it again when the footage is replayed. I think in the out-of-universe reason is possibly they didn't want to pay Bibi Besh any kind of fees for reusing footage of her in the movie.
Yeah, it kind of like reminds me of the use of Jor-El.
Yeah, the Brando.
In the Superman films. They had to be real careful with Marlon Brando's appearances.
Exactly. But this is good as well. We're starting to see what the Klingons really are. I mean, that design of Warbird carried on even into Next Generation and all the others.
But the color in this one, it's super like lime green. It really stands out. I feel like they toned it down a little bit.
Yeah, well, originally it was going to be Romulans as the bad guys in this movie, and their ships are a brighter green. However, they changed it to Klingons because they felt it would be better, but the ship was already designed. So
such great practical space action shots in this movie.
Well, this is why ILM are the masters, isn't it?
Yes.
ILM are.
Yes, I love the touch of the electric kind of sparking that they do with the, it's like an animated element that they add on top of it. It really brings it to life.
Oh, what a wonderful shot this is. I love this with the space dock at Earth.
Yes.
And it's the scale of the space dock. As it gets closer, you realize how absolutely tiny the Enterprise is in comparison.
Yeah. Yeah, didn't they reuse that prop for that space station?
They actually reused the footage.
Oh.
In Next Generation a few times, and they actually overlaid the Enterprise D over the shot of the Enterprise entering.
I see.
But again, it emphasizes how big the space dock is supposed to be. If a Galaxy-class ship, which is supposed to be many times bigger than the Enterprise, well, the original Enterprise here can enter. That may throw up some continuity about how they both seem to fit through the doors, open the same amount, but we'll not go into that.
Here's another fun prop I brought for the display. I just was so curious to see what would happen if I combined universes. This is a Millenna Prize.
That's awesome. This is a shot I really like here, where the staff at Starfleet, we're getting a cameo from Janice Rand in a moment, and they're looking at the damage to the Enterprise, kind of shocked by how Like it's like the airport lounge they're waiting in, like the waiting room, and they all look out the window in a minute, and they just, as the Enterprise is sort of docking, they're all just shocked by how much damage it's taken on.
Yeah, you almost feel like this one they've learned a number of things from the first two films in terms of how to kind of pace these sequences a little better. Because the first one, I remember when they do these shots at the beginning, it just goes on and on and on.
I know, David. We spoke about that when we spoke about Star Trek 2. I spoke with David Weiner about that. The actual panning shot of the Enterprise is over 5 minutes long, and it's a beautiful shot, but it just is too long.
Yeah, I mean, I think at the time people were so excited, especially the fans, to see it on the big screen. They were really milking it for all it was worth. But those moments have not held up well with bringing on new fans. Confused, exactly. Just confused by why these shots are so long. But I am also a member of the Star Trek Motion Picture Appreciation Society on Facebook, which was founded by a friend of mine. Rick, I'm blanking on his last name, but he started this thing, and it's an amazing fan passion for that original film, and some of the things that are shared there are so exclusive and unique to that moment when that first picture was opening, like the McDonald's tie-in that I knew nothing about. There was like McDonald's merchandise for the Star Trek motion picture. Little things like that are just so much fun to discover.
Yeah, they really are.
Rick Reed, that's his name, Rick Reed. He helped on In Search of Darkness 2. He helped source some clips for that.
There we go. This scene here. Obviously, this must be Nimoy's voice they're using here, but it's kind of...
Yeah, I remember being scared of this scene when I was a kid.
Yeah. It's quite nice actually in this film as well, because they're giving DeForest Kelley a little bit more to do than just shout catchphrases.
Well, the irony of this too is kind of thick with him embodying the member of the crew that he has the most like contention with, so now he's like taking on his personalities. The two of them clearly love each other, but on the outside they're constantly fighting.
Like I said, it's nice because DeForest Kelley often doesn't get much to do out the trio.
Yeah, he's probably the most underrated, and he's an excellent performer in the series. Yeah, I wonder if he'll ever return in any capacity with however many years he has left. If there's some way to make sense of it. Because I heard he was in the Calvin series at some point. There was something worked in to where Kirk was going to have an appearance, in some sort of multiverse.
Possibly, but they're going to have to get the skates on because Shatner's not getting any younger.
No, I mean, it really is challenging to make any sense out of having him appear at
Is
his
Shatner 90 now?
Yeah, he's like in his 90s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Here we are. This is the scene we were referring to earlier, where it's been reshot. But if you've ever seen Airplane 2, it looks like he's in Buck Murdoch's office.
Yeah.
So we've got a couple of questions actually from Sparky John and from Sharon. I'll kind of merge them in. Questions for you, Lon, from our Discord community. First off, which do you think of the Kelvinverse movies is your favorite?
I would say the first one.
First one, obviously. Yeah. And question from Sharon, which is, how would you rank all the Star Trek movies? Which do you watch regularly and which do you not prefer and why? I don't think we're looking for a concise list of like 5, 7, 8 or whatever. I think we're looking for, what are your top few and what ones do you not go back to as much?
Yeah, well, I mean, being a child of the 80s, Star Trek 4 has always been a kind of shoe-in to my heart. I've always loved that film for multiple reasons. I at the same time, when I'm in the mood for something a little bit more heady and challenging, I think the 6th entry in this franchise might be one of my favorites as well. I throw on Generations randomly a lot because there's something about the excitement of Next Generation moving into cinema and the transition from this franchise into that franchise. Even though the movie maybe isn't as good as everyone was hoping would be, there's something special about it that I like to revisit.
What I would say about Generations is I think Generations is a triumph of lighting and cinematography. And the reason being, it shows the difference and how much difference a different cinematographer and lighting effects make to the same sets.
Yeah. There's something about movies that aren't quite perfect that have always attracted me. Like there's something unfinished. So I keep coming back to them. I love the 5th one. As odd as that is to say, there's something so interesting about taking on the concept of God and exploring that in the Star Trek universe. And as frumpy and weird as it ultimately is, I do consider the 5th one among my favorites. But it's a franchise love. I don't think they're ever going to put out a Star Trek product that I utterly despise or anything. There's always a place in my heart for anything Star Trek, and I'm currently on Discovery season 3, and I'm taking in all of the absolute modern cutting edge take on Star Trek, and it's really interesting to see like the uber politically correct era that we are in now and Star Trek. There's something kind of special about that. If you have gay characters for the first time, like blatantly gay characters, which was always in the earlier stages was a controversy because maybe Roddenberry wasn't as comfortable with that, as the fan base would have been. Yeah. And yet it goes against the fundamental principles of what Star Trek represents. The idea of inclusivity is represented beautifully in this franchise, and always was a progressive concept, when it first came out.
Yeah.
So you have to, take your hat off to any of those moments in history where Star Trek makes that leap.
Oh, definitely.
We are all in this together. That's something that I think everyone can get behind.
I just want to go back to the film for a moment here. We're seeing Captain Esteban, who is the captain of the Grissom, who I'm sorry to say I think is possibly the worst captain in all the Star Trek movies.
He's so non-memorable. But did they even make an action figure of him? It's
he was probably published as Starship Captain. Didn't even get his name on the box. But what I would say is, in the Star Trek universe here, the Grissom is a science research vessel. So I think he possibly is more of a scientist than a captain. He's maybe a scientist who holds the rank of captain to command the ship, but isn't so much of a military man because he seems to be rather inept when it comes to military side of Starfleet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the whole notion of hierarchy has always been a very prominent theme in the Star Trek series. So it's always interesting when unlikely characters are forced to be in the role of the captain seat.
Yeah.
Discovery is definitely exploring a lot of that similar themes with I forget the name of the character. He's the alien.
Saru.
Yeah, like him as a captain is so interesting.
Mm.
And I think Sulu becomes a captain in the 6th film.
He becomes a captain in the 6th film. Yeah.
Yeah, which is also really cool. It's like, what is it like to have?
Well, this again was something we spoke about on in the watch party with David. If you look at this, the crew are together, but they are overranked for their roles on the ship. Because Kirk, okay, he was an admiral who had to take over because he was there due to experience. But equally, Sulu, Uhura, and Chekhov all hold the rank of commander. So, I mean, they aren't just, they aren't junior officers or even intermediate officers. They are senior veteran officers. And then you've got Scotty, who's a captain, actually holds the rank of captain himself. So you've got, a lot of overranked staff. One of the things we touched on last time is their sense of friendship holding them back in their careers, and Sulu was the one to break away from it.
Yeah, that's an interesting nuance that they never explored. It's interesting because, like, in the entertainment industry, it's all about hierarchy as well.
Yeah.
So the way that may play on and off screen with the character dynamics, because I know there's stories about how Scotty and Kirk the actors, didn't get along at all. Like, he despises him apparently, or did, before he passed on. So it's always interesting to kind of like make metaphor out of what is happening on and off screen with their ranks. Now this actor who played Spock's father,
Mark Leonard.
Yes, he did such a great job.
He did, and he carried the role on into Next Generation as well.
Yeah. There's some really great Next Generation episodes where they have Leonard Nimoy, and I think Scotty came back too at one point. Like I remember him and LaForge working together.
Got a question for you here as well from Sparky John, one of our producers, which is, how do you feel about Deep Space Nine? I mean, I've always been vocal in my love for the show. I think it's the best of the Trek TV shows.
Deep Space Nine is awesome. That era when they did the Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, Voyager is probably some of my favorite moments in the franchise's history, and was really excited about the Picard series because it was going to revisit a lot of that stuff. And I think Deep Space Nine is underrated as well as Voyager. I always thought Voyager was a lot of fun as well. And
I think Voyager, though, got better after its first 2 seasons, very much like Next Generation.
Yeah, they had to kind of get their footing.
Yeah.
But once they introduced a lot of the Borg,
did away with the Kazon.
Yeah, here, I got another prop for you. I loved the introduction of species 8472.
Oh, species 8472.
From the and because it was sort of non-humanoid in its design. So they have the Harry Kim 2-pack here with 8472 and
Ensign Harry Kim, the perpetual ensign.
Like an infection on his face. Yeah, I love that stuff. And Playmates made so much merchandise. They just kept coming out with stuff. I was inundated by it by my father. He was always, vicariously buying toys through me. and just dumping them on me. And I kept them in the package and just had them for years and years until one day I sold them at like a convention.
Oh dear. We're about to see a very well-established sci-fi trope here, but I'll go with it. I'll just assume that their cameras were recording at 50K or something. It's the whole zoom and enhance.
Oh, yeah. The use of the movie in the movie.
Yeah. What I would say is, I mean, we can actually see film grain on this footage, which is unusual.
Oh, there's some interlacing issues there.
Yeah.
The camera angle changes and everything.
Yeah.
He snuck in a mind meld there.
Yeah, he did.
He was thinking ahead.
Gosh, Shatner's hair looks really grey there in that light for some reason.
Yeah, I don't think the lighting is being super kind to either of their hairdos here.
Yeah. This is like when your friend's dad comes over to talk to you about something wrong you've done.
Yeah, I could see that for sure. Love this set here. I don't know how they pulled this up. It's probably a stage. Now, have we talked about the casting change on her?
We haven't spoken about the casting change on Savick yet from Kirstie Alley, who was unavailable. But I personally think I prefer Robin Curtis's version.
Yeah, I think she's less distracting because Kirstie
Yes.
Alley's a movie star. So sometimes that works better when you have the actor is, oh, so gross. What are those things?
Bacteria that evolved.
That's right. Genesis, having an impact on the environment. Or this is all the result of Genesis, correct?
It is. It's the Genesis planet. The planet itself, something I didn't realize until the other day. If you remember, the Genesis device was set off in the Mutara Nebula, which was that thick gaseous nebula where they were fighting. And if you look now, the Genesis planet isn't in the nebula because the Genesis planet was formed from the nebula.
Mm.
So all the gaseous material and all the spatial dust and stuff, that is what became Genesis.
It's interesting because I feel like they could have continued to mine the Genesis concept for more stories in the Star Trek universe.
They have in the books and the sort of expanded universe stuff. There is.
Yeah, it's cool. I mean, we were also talking about earlier the theories about the relationship between V'ger and the Borg, and then you had brought up Doctor Who.
Mm-hmm.
Apparently, you said there's a comic book crossover.
It's set after First Contact, I believe, with Doctor Who and the crew of the Enterprise getting back to the future, but no Marty or Doc in that one. So it's
I love those comic book crossovers. They did one with the Calvinverse and Green Lantern not long ago, which was actually really fun. If you're a Green Lantern fan, the IDW did a couple of series where they crossed over the whole Green Lantern mythology and Star Trek, using the Chris Pine models and all the drawings. It was a lot of fun. And I think they did, I want to say they did Planet of the Apes crossover as well.
Wow.
Star Trek.
Wow, it's crazy. Some crossovers are great, but then movie crossovers go too far sometimes.
Yeah. Well, the comics, like, you can do anything. The comics are a great like place to experiment with that stuff.
They are, but I mean, I was discussing with some friends the other day about the ultimate movie crossover franchise that would never happen, and it would be dreadful, yet it would make about $10 billion at the box office. Right? So imagine this. One of the Xeno ships from Aliens lands on the island from Jurassic World. Okay?
Yeah.
And then the Fast and Furious team are sent in to clean it up.
That would make insurmountable amounts of cash. They should just
It'd be dreadful.
It would be terrible.
But just imagine Vin Diesel in his black Charger racing away from xenomorph T-Rexes and Raptors.
Is it not where we're headed, though? I feel like it's coming. Like, give it another 10, 15 years, and we will see every conceivable, crossover that the lawyers have agreed, to.
Now, this is Star Trek stuff that I don't like so much of this era. This is throwback, almost original series style Star Trek.
Yeah,
where we're seeing lava lamps and she's got Christmas lights on her outfit.
Totally. Yeah, I don't hate that stuff. I mean, there's something fun and hokey about Star Trek that, we were talking about earlier. The original series has moments that have become memes of so bad it's good. So that's just a part of Star Trek that, fans have to contend with, is the fact that there's some really frumpy, dumb stuff out there. Some really politically incorrect stuff as well, from TNG and as well. Wouldn't fly today.
Oh, definitely.
But
Calbot says it's a retro future themed bar. That's probably the best way to describe it.
Yeah, and I think every series has to deal with like the Star Wars factor, that they pulled it off in such a iconic way that there's nothing can happen without being compared to the Cantina bar.
The other thing here, price you name, money I got. But the Federation doesn't have currency. So how does McCoy... This is something I've always wondered about Star Trek, and there are books on it. I can appreciate maybe in Deep Space Nine, for example, in an outlying outpost where they have interaction with other cultures, that they are given some kind of a stipend or an allowance to spend with other nations, with other species, etc. But being based there, I suppose he's got wealth somehow. But the Earth itself, they've said, is already a no currency. The Federation is a no currency environment.
Mm-hmm.
So what is he? I don't know.
It's almost like a concept that sounds great, and when you say it, it makes sense. But then when you have to apply it into these narratives, it gets a little tricky to really make sense out of it.
Like I say, in Deep Space Nine, you can understand on the space station, multicultural, you need something to be able to barter with alien species who maybe aren't currency free, but on the Federation homeworld, I'm not quite sure how that would work.
Yeah, well, you think about the current, situation that we have here on Earth, and the way money dictates so much, to a degree of like paranoia. If you really go deep down that rabbit hole, it just gets weirder and weirder. It would be wonderful if we could liberate ourselves from this exactly. Capitalistic society.
I would say as well, what I've noticed in a few of these scenes is, and with these security guards, these are Starfleet security officers. He's an admiral. You should be, yes, sir, no, sir, 3 bags full, sir, with him.
Right.
And
maybe
then
it's the way he's dressed.
Well, no, he recognized him as an admiral. I mean, they are military police officers, etc. But in a moment, we see as well one of the guards being quite rude to Sulu. Watch out for that moment. One of the guys being rude, and Sulu is a commander, so he's a high-ranking officer against this sort of grunt guard. Yeah.
Yeah, what is that, you know? But like conflict is what drives a lot of these things in the writing. So they're often trying to like squeeze out conflict, even though it doesn't make a ton of sense in these things. I know you notice that a lot in Lost. If you ever watched the Lost series, characters are constantly intimidating one another and fighting, and it doesn't really make a lot of sense for the narrative or for progressing the plot. But
I appreciate that. I just find it strange that sometimes the military ranking stuff matters, and then other times it doesn't.
Yeah.
And you'd imagine on a starbase or Starfleet headquarters that ranking and whatever would be yes, sir, no. It would be really important in the military environment.
Yeah, but is that a lot? Is that maybe a little bit more boring, you know, for the audience?
Oh, it is. Possibly.
It's always the same tone, you know, with every interaction. And Star Trek is always filled with humility.
Yeah.
So that's one of the things about the series that has always, especially this one with the original crew in these movies, they did a really good job of kind of balancing the humor with the and you see that similar with like the Marvel universe now, the way they've kind of tapped into that, you know, don't take it too seriously, but you know, but it is, you know.
Exactly. It's got some great humor in this film. That's one of the things I do like about it.
Yeah, all 6 of the originals do a great job of balancing the drama.
Yes, Carla, the captain of the Excelsior is Doogie Howser's father, and after the moments we see later, he was lost on a mission and went back in time and had a precocious doctor son. And unfortunately, yes.
So we have James Doohan in the documentary.
Mm-hmm.
I know David sat down with him.
Not with James Doohan. I think David might have struggled to speak to James Doohan.
Because he's one of the survivors, and then she is as well, right?
It's not James Doohan in the documentary. James Doohan's been dead over 10, 15 years.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. It's
Walter Koenig.
Yes, Walter Koenig.
Walter Koenig is in Search of Tomorrow, yes. We would have liked to have had James Doohan, but he wasn't returning our calls.
He's space dust. He's floating in the atmosphere.
Right.
You know, bless his heart. God rest his soul.
Yeah.
But there's 3 with Kirk.
Yes, so three of the crew still alive. That would be Sulu, Chekhov, and Uhura.
Yeah.
And Kirk, of course. Because Shatner's still with us.
Yeah.
Someone, I saw a comment today, actually, someone said about this wonderful scene we're about to see in a minute where they're stealing the Enterprise. It's the most exciting moment of someone ever backing a car out the garage. And it is. It's a wonderful moment.
These are always great moments in these movies when they get the band back together.
Oh, it definitely is Sparky John. The music on this next scene is brilliant. It's I just love the ILM stuff on this is just wonderful to see.
Yeah, they really nailed their pipeline on the effects on this movie. It's probably some of the best.
It's also quite an interesting scene because you're seeing the crew of the Enterprise not performing their normal duties in this makeshift crew. So you've got Scotty, who's doing engineering, but he appears to be acting as, I don't know, maybe some kind of operations or weapons officer, or Sulu's acting as the pilot, the helmsman. But then you've got Chekhov acting as sort of a combination of science officer and communications officer. So it's kind of nice to see them kind of just filling in for each other.
Yeah, they're wearing multiple hats.
Yeah.
Oh, here's the actor from RoboCop here.
Miguel Ferreira. Yep.
Yeah, Miguel Ferreira from Twin Peaks as well, right?
What we're seeing here is it's quite interesting. We're seeing some bridge design elements that were carried on a few years later in Star Trek Next Generation, whereby the helm and the con are on a separate, they've got sort of a one-piece arrangement there on the Enterprise. And we're seeing on the Excelsior bridge, it's much more sort of broken up in the way that we'd see in the Enterprise D. With the Excelsior.
Yeah, and the modern stuff, everything is like really like designed for the wide canvas.
Yeah.
And it's these big, long sets that have the huge like window.
Exactly.
It feels a lot more like spacious now.
That's the parking sensors going off.
Look on Scotty's face.
Oh, it makes me laugh. I think of the scene in Galaxy Quest where they're doing something similar. They're getting the ship out of the dock and they scrape it up the wall.
Yeah, it's great. I love Galaxy Quest, and I love the other series from the Family Guy creator,
Orville.
Orville,
which I think
I can't wait for the third season.
Yeah.
I love that they pulled that off.
It really finds its ground in the second season.
Yeah, it's for TNG fans. It's a wonderful addition.
Speaking of wonderful, this score is just so good.
Yeah, it's a fantastic score. They all the movies have just impeccable music.
So an interesting thing here for any Star Trek fans watching, apparently the transwarp drive that was fitted to the Excelsior is not the same as Borg transwarp, as in transwarp corridors that the Borg use in the Voyager Next Generation DS9 type era. It's a different transwarp, apparently. This is some kind of other scale of warp drive that the Excelsior has.
But is the dilithium crystals something that is incorporated into this, or is that later?
That's in the next film. The dilithium crystals need recrystallizing in the Klingon ship.
Okay.
This as well is quite interesting that supposedly, I mean, this is funny anyway, but for transwarp, apparently everyone has to brace themselves and get ready to go. So you can imagine it is a prototype ship. Because ships in the Star Trek universe are fitted when they go to warp drive something called inertial dampeners. And what they do is they basically stop the people inside being subject to the external momentum of the ship.
Mm-hmm.
There's an episode of Deep Space Nine where there is a ship where the inertial dampeners have failed on it, and there's a crew that's killed by it when they go to warp. The ship went to warp and they were all crushed.
Yeah, I think it was Discovery first season when they were really experimenting with the tone, what they could get away with, I guess. It was like R-rated Star Trek.
Yeah.
And they transport them over to a ship where there's been some kind of destruction, and the gore that they show was like, unlike, I think they even dropped an F-bomb.
Oh, they did. I had trouble with that in Discovery, and
it's weird because Star Trek is always kind of a family-friendly
swearing
affair
in my Star Trek. No.
Yeah, it doesn't quite make sense. but they're definitely trying to experiment with the tone, especially in that first season.
So we're seeing Savick and David on their side quest on the planet at the moment to look for whatever the noises are, which is quite interesting. We can find a child crying. And of course, as we were discussing before we started this is David on his first kind of mission away from his mother. He's never, as his mother says, I don't want my son gallivanting around the galaxy,
right.
Chasing around the galaxy, going on missions and things. And he's actually on a mission. Is this why Carol is missing from this movie? Because she didn't want him doing this kind of mission. She wanted him to go back to a research position. She probably said to him, I don't want you, going to the planets. I don't want you looking at this, because she wanted to keep him safe. That was her whole point for not involving Kirk in his life. When he was younger, right. He's gone away and done this. So
as we all know, it doesn't really go well.
No. Really? They're saying.
It's funny because the whole movie, it feels like they have to undo the damage that was done from the previous film.
Yeah.
But it's done so well that you don't really question it. And I think everybody knows and deep down wants Spock to be a part of this crew.
Oh yeah.
So in a way, the movie serves as like a Band-Aid.
That's right. Linda Hill in the Discord chat says, I love that crew woman's reaction shot there. It's definitely like, really? Now we're seeing the Klingon ship. You are the worst captain ever. I'm sorry, Captain Esteban, but you are 100% responsible for what's about to happen. Right? They've already said standard procedure is you call red alert and the shields automatically go up in the Star Trek universe.
That's right.
So look, the ship's blown up immediately. So that clearly the shields weren't up.
Yeah, they weren't prepared for that. My DVD is failing. I'm having technical difficulties. I'm going to get the movie running on another monitor here.
Okie dokie. I'm loving Christopher Lloyd here. So wonderful.
Yeah, this is probably one of the more underrated Christopher Lloyd performances.
Oh, definitely. And I love the fact that Savick is playing a really good Vulcan here, just stating the obvious all the time.
Yeah.
At a prime, and thus the tradition of the Oberths getting wrecked was born. That's very true.
Can you give me a time stamp or
sure thing? If you're getting ready, so just coming up to 52 minutes in.
52.
And this is the first time we get to see the traditional. Well, it was sort of shown briefly in Star Trek: The Motion Picture, but now we're seeing properly the Klingon sort of new costumes and the daggers and the weapons that became sort of famous. Again, going right through Trek to the later series.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think somebody was saying about how had they incorporated the Klingon conflict more so in the first film, that it could have really helped the pacing of that movie.
Definitely.
Their appearance in the first film is, it's clearly they're still developing it towards this, but it's almost there, you know. Oh, I love these creatures.
Wow, she's really laying it thick on him.
Okay, I got Christopher Lloyd with a giant bug around his neck. That's where I'm at.
You've gone a bit far. Can we turn the volume down on your end a little bit as well, possible? Oh. Yeah, you're about a minute too far ahead. We're just coming up to that scene now.
Okay.
Oh.
It's cool creature design.
It's a very cool creature design. And again, this is showing the kind of the brutal Klingons rather than, you can't imagine original series Klingons doing that.
Right. Yeah, original series Klingons were pretty lame.
They weren't as developed.
Yeah. I mean, just the look, the how iconic it is now to think that there was a time when the Klingons didn't have their ridges. But I think they continue to try and like write a reason.
They did. They wrote a reason. They wrote a reason in Enterprise to that due to a virus that the Klingons had.
Yeah, that's funny.
Which also helps with continuity in the Klingons in Discovery, because Klingons didn't become cured of their illness that caused them to lose their ridges until sometime between the end of the original series and the motion picture, which is where they reappeared with it. But it was stated in a lot of the extra canon that some Klingons who were so proud, they would have plastic surgery to make themselves look monstrous rather than having that kind of human look that they had in the original series, which explains a lot of the Klingons that we see in Discovery, for example, who look they look stereotypes of Klingons. Their faces are very ridged, very sharp teeth, etc., shaved heads. And it was done as plastic surgery as a way of trying to make themselves look that way. Very good at a prime, hours instead of days. Now we have minutes instead of hours. That's true.
This outfit on Kirk is a little bit easier to accept. I think
it is.
They're all a bit eccentric designs.
What I don't quite get is Kirk is an admiral, and in the TNG era and even in original series, when you see admirals and commodores, you know, the senior, once they're above captains, they pretty much get free reign to do what they want. In the series, they have like their own ships. They're assigned a ship and can go wherever they want and do whatever they want. Yet he seems to be a captain kept on a fairly short leash. Sorry, an admiral kept on a fairly short leash.
Well, I think if you were to remove that element of like political hierarchy that he has to work against, it becomes a little less.
If he was able to use his full admiral powers and say, right, we're sending a fleet to the planet Genesis, then yeah, the movie might be somewhat different.
Yeah, I mean, when you go to the Calvin series and they get into the origin of Kirk, I mean, it's kind of all about the fact that he's a difficult officer,
Yeah.
that he doesn't play by the rules. I forget the name of the test, but
Kobayashi Maru.
Yes. That is very much a metaphor for what we can expect from this captain. All these young child actor versions of Spock are interesting to see. The way they cast his many stages.
They really are, and I'm just going to scroll back in the chat. I believe Carla posted a full list of all the actors who play young Spock, which is rather wonderful. And in the, I believe it was in the book and deleted scenes that Saavik actually would become pregnant by Spock, but it was a thread never picked up on.
Well, there's definitely some chemistry going on right now between these two.
Yeah. And of course, let's not forget that in the original script for Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country, Saavik was due to come back and play the part of Valaris, the Vulcan kind of baddie, the conspirator on the ship, but they decided that Saavik wouldn't do that. His pet Targ yet again.
Yeah, he gets his own little moment there, doesn't he? Like he's the only one featured in that moment. But you get to see the eyes blink and everything. All the creature fans, going nuts for that one. Yeah, it isn't until the Calvin verse where they really go over the top with monsters and creatures in the Star Trek universe. That was never really a big part of Star Trek. And the story about how they tried to pull off the rock monster stuff in the fifth one is really interesting.
Wow, that's very interesting.
They had to abandon it because it looked so silly.
We'll cover that when we will be covering Star Trek V at some point. But Phonic, that's not fair. Calling the Targ one of Dr. Brundle's failed experiments. That's a little harsh, because many Klingons would say they had loyal pet Targs. They're akin to a dog to a Klingon.
Yeah, well, especially in The Fly 2, we really get the dog puppet that they had to create and trigger the plot on that one.
Now, there's an interesting scene here from Michael Okuda, whereby, coming up in a moment, Michael Okuda, who created the Klingon language, when he created the Klingon spoken by Christopher Lloyd in this scene, Christopher Lloyd actually got some of the words in the wrong order in a moment when he's on the radio and he says, kill one, I don't mind which one. He got the grammar wrong on it. So Michael Okuda actually changed the language to match the lines spoken by Christopher Lloyd.
Oh, that's
that in a moment.
Now, this was before Back to the Future, correct?
This would be just before Back to the Future would have started filming. Yeah,
got it. Because I think the success of Back to the Future brought
exactly. I mean, originally the captain was due to be played by James Edward Olmos.
Right. Yes, I read that.
But they believed he was physically too small for the role.
Yes.
Christopher Lloyd.
Lloyd's got those great He's got those very beaming eyes, you know.
He's also quite tall, I believe. I think he's over 6 foot tall, which
I don't know if you saw recently. They did a promo where he plays the live action version of Rick from.
Yes, I saw that.
Or Morty. Or no,
which is quite funny, quite meta, because Rick is really Doc Brown, and it's kind of.
Yeah, that's what it's all based on, right?
Yeah.
He's getting up there, though. Christopher Lloyd.
He's a wonderful, wonderful actor. Real.
Yeah, treasure. I'm so glad he's still appearing in films. Yeah.
And now this is some classic Klingon sort of cultural stuff we're seeing for the first time. The kind of brutality on their ships we're about to see.
Yeah,
and the introduction of Kelly cams, which is the Klingon measurement for distance. This is the first time we're mentioning it.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, this movie really does set up a lot of the mythology that I think people think of the Klingons with when TNG came out, and the relevancy of Worf, and Worf having to carry all the negative elements of the Klingon series, you know.
Exactly. I mean, if you a Worf series potentially.
Yeah, let's talk about Worf series. I think that could be really interesting.
Worf.
Yeah,
I mean, as you said, it's interesting because Worf really had to build bridges and be an ambassador for the Klingon species. As we're seeing them here as basically just thugs and brutal, and
it's like Klingons at their worst.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's the 6th film where they really start to build a bridge to the Klingon culture, and you know, it's a beautiful narrative. It's an arc for Kirk and his feelings, having gone through what he does in this film, and what he accomplishes in the 6th film.
Well, the repercussions of this movie are felt in the 6th movie, which we're not going to speak about right this moment, but we'll see about it soon.
Yeah, I recently rewatched the episode where Riker has to become a first
officer on a Klingon vessel.
Officer on a Klingon ship. It's a really interesting episode.
I do find it a little strange that the Klingon commander wouldn't have known that if it was the Enterprise, it was going to be Kirk, because he's known as a legend even amongst the Klingon Empire.
Right. I think a lot of it is based on Khan's performance in the sex. So they had to sort of like mirror that, but then, you know, make sort of a Klingon version of.
Well, apparently they based a lot of it almost on samurai type culture, with a sense of honor was one of the things they tried to. And there are elements of that here. You can see maybe was going a little off-piste. But good point, Mad Matt. Is Kruger a respected Klingon officer or just a mercenary? I think he's a Klingon captain who has gone a little bit of his own way on a mission.
Right.
I don't believe he's working for the defense. He's a bit rogue.
Now, that actor who played Kirk's son, he shows up in a TNG episode. I think it was
does.
like
Merritt.
Yeah.
Merritt Buttrick. He shows up in the first season. The episode, he plays a member of a species who were basically drug addicted and reliant on another.
That's right.
Fortunately, doesn't bode too well with Merritt Buttrick himself, as he had some problems that ultimately led to his death that were potentially connected with it.
Yeah, well, maybe he was channeling some of that real.
Yeah,
he feels very strung out in that role.
Yeah. But we're seeing something. I think they call it a dakta. They call it in Klingon. The dagger. Each dagger has an emblem belonging to each person. Yeah, the chatter say symbiosis is the episode. That's right.
That was that blow right there.
There we go.
There's that moment we were talking about with the stumble.
That's right. And the thing is here. I mean, this is the moment we're about to see with Kirk. Was they said when they filmed this, originally this was an accident, and then Nimoy liked it, so they shot it this way. He kind of closed a lot of the set down where we're about to see Kirk stumble as he walks backwards, and it's a physical representation of Kirk, who's Mr. Confident, always on top. Nothing ever phases him. That stumble is a physical representation of his emotional failing. Exactly, Sparky John's just relaying it to the chat.
It's also the movie kind of takes on a revenge element at this point.
Yeah,
which I think really helps carry the third act.
And I think now is probably an apt time to mention something. One of the things we spoke about earlier, one of the things I spoke to you about before this is, let's go back to Wrath of Khan, to what Carol Marcus, David's mother, said. She didn't want David going around the galaxy like his father, getting into fights, getting into all these missions, all this kind of stuff. She wanted him to be safe. First time out the door. She's proven right.
Yeah, it's probably the darkest moment that we ever witnessed for Kirk's character, you know. Yeah. It's a real defining part of his character here. And we were talking about how Kirk's feelings towards the Klingons was somewhat echoed in TNG's, application of the Picard-Borg conflict and the way that plays out. All of the prejudices and the anger, towards a particular race.
But again, this is something we spoke about before we started. We're about to see Kirk lose some of the most important things in his life. He's lost his son, and he's about to kill possibly the greatest love in his life, which is the Enterprise itself.
Right.
He's sacred. And again, does it go back to the whole needs of the many, the needs of the few that Spock spoke about? Because Shatner's actually, to get the one back, again, as they talk about towards the end of the film, he's sacrificing everything. He's throwing his career, the crew are throwing their careers away. He's lost his son. He's throwing the Enterprise away. He's losing his freedom, potentially going to prison. All that just to get on a chance of getting Spock back. Was and a question for the Discord chat. Yes, I know it balances out, but was Kirk's sacrifice worth it?
You know, for me, one of the more iconic moments of this franchise, I want to say it's the fifth one, where they're camping and they're singing camping tunes, you know, all together. It almost feels like, there you go. They're all together camping, and they're all friends on an adventure together. It was all worth it.
That's interesting, Carla. You're saying it here. I hate to admit this, but I was more moved by the loss of the Enterprise versus Kirk's son. Well, in relative terms, the Enterprise had been a constant and had been there for, well, you'd known the Enterprise for 20, 25 years when this happened. You'd known Kirk's son for a movie and a half.
Right. I don't think we knew he had a son.
No, you didn't know he had a son to Star Trek 2, but we didn't get many moments to really, to really bond with him.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the things. I mean, it's very sad, the stuff. David's death is very much played for the impact of it on Kirk, but we don't necessarily feel what Kirk's feeling. Because I don't think there was enough stuff where we really got attached to fall in love with David. I think maybe a little more David development might have helped. Sure.
Well, had they, you know, planted him in the series, you know, that could have been helpful. Yeah. The way Khan was kind of mined from the original series was always, so Space Seed becomes like a prequel if you are introduced to the movies first. It's fun to see the origins of that storyline in the series.
Yeah.
You know, they could have had the introduction of his son happen then. Really cool effects here with the.
This is very cool.
Wow, still holds up really well.
Yeah. But I mean, this is the real death of a friend we're seeing here. We're seeing the Enterprise, the constant. But again, that's one thing I struggled with. I'm going to go to the Kelvin movies now, the most recent one, where the Enterprise was destroyed, and that felt rather hollow. It felt like they were just trying to repeat the same beats.
Yeah. Star Trek, what was it?
Into Darkness?
Into Darkness was the
or was
third
it Beyond?
One? Beyond was the third one. It felt like more like an action movie.
Yeah.
You know, it didn't have the imagination that I would hope for. And I felt the same way about the one before it too, Into Darkness. It's a rehash of stuff we'd seen. And I like when Star Trek is on that forefront of science, imagination, the universe itself. You know, I like the ones where they're going to the absolute limits of what's imaginable, you know, within the cosmos. When you stick them in one particular environment and it becomes a cliche sort of scenario of an action movie, that it got criticized as being like the Fast and Furious, of the Star Trek franchise.
I think that's one of the things. It's the death of the Enterprise there is very sad and has a fitting send off, but it was just played as an action scene, I think, in that Trek movie where they destroyed the Kelvinverse Enterprise. What's very interesting for anyone watching as well is the wreckage of the Enterprise, in the way that Star Trek reused so much stuff in many episodes of Voyager, TNG, and Deep Space Nine. If you see starship wreckage either floating in space or on a planet, a lot of that are bits of the original Enterprise that were used just as broken up starship.
That's interesting. I love all of this happening amidst the concept of Genesis, because it creates such a great exciting environment, for this conflict to happen. You had everything around them is going nuts.
Yeah, exactly. It's the planet's falling apart. Everything's just falling apart. It's things couldn't be much worse than they are.
Yeah, I think it would be really neat to revisit Genesis in a future series and go back to this concept, because there's a lot there.
I would like to see some more Genesis stuff. I mean, they have in the books, they did a series called the Genesis Wave, which is whereby it was like a weaponized wave of the Genesis, and it was basically just a weaponized version of Genesis was acquired by somebody, and they had to kind of stop it, and it was okay.
But the idea of Genesis ultimately spawning intelligent life could be a really interesting storyline,
especially the kind of the God connections with it as well. Because are you whatever's created by Genesis? If intelligent life spawns by it, are you the creator? Are you the God?
Right. Yeah, I thought it was neat in the end of the Picard series when they introduced that that element of like technical godlike element that it starts to peek out from like a hole in space for a moment. You just get a glimpse of it.
Like the robot god, whatever.
Yeah, the robot god. It was so cool. Yeah.
What I really like about this scene we're seeing here, though, is this is a no-win scenario, and this is what the Kobayashi Maru stuff was building up to. I mean, they are on a planet. They have no ship. Their ship has been destroyed. They've got no one in the sky they can radio that's friendly to them.
Yeah.
Okay, we got a question for you, Lon, from Sparky John, which is how important and ingrained do you feel that James Horner's score is with the second and third Star Trek movies?
Oh, I mean, it's a fundamental part of these films, and it continued on. The fifth one is I think the fifth one was James Horner as well, where they.
No, I don't believe it. I think it was only 2 and 3 from memory, I believe.
Oh, okay, so the composer is Jerry Goldsmith who took it on.
I think he might take it on 5, but he didn't take on 6.
He's clearly trying to emulate the style of the previous movies. But I think it was the motion picture, right, that introduced the theme that would be used
the Next Generation theme. That's right. Yeah, that was Jerry Goldsmith.
Huge. I mean, that's huge. That might be the most iconic theme of all the Star Trek themes.
Oh, without a doubt.
First generation.
But don't forget as well that originally Star Trek Next Generation had another theme. It wasn't the Jerry Goldsmith Star Trek the Motion Picture theme used as the main theme for it. They had another theme for Next Generation. You can find it on YouTube if anyone wants to find it.
Oh, interesting. I would love to hear that.
But it sounds like an imitation of the Star Trek theme.
Yeah, I mean, I think what they established in the 90s with that music, with these films, and in the 90s, it became such a staple of the Star Trek lore when they did Enterprise, and it had that pop song, which I later learned. I think David and I were at an event together, and somebody who had worked on that series was like, "Oh yeah, it was some political, connection to some guy's band, and that it got through, and then that ultimately became." And it's terrible. I mean, I think it's one of the worst theme songs that ever happened for Star Trek, and it really revealed just how important those symphonic suites really are for this franchise.
Oh, without a doubt. Carla has a question for you, Lon, which is they wanted to film the Genesis scenes in Hawaii but didn't have the budget, so they shot it all on a soundstage. Do you think the Genesis planets look more like TV than film? Is it a throwback, or does it look cheap?
Well, some stages have a certain quality. It's a little surreal for it to be shot the way it is, but it's also really well executed.
They have a lot more control, of course, on the soundstage.
Yeah, this part of the chunk of the when Christopher Lloyd begins to fall. I always thought that was funny because the way you can see it's not that heavy as it's scaling down.
So the inevitable polystyrene boulder.
Oh yeah, and then the kick to the face on Christopher Lloyd here.
And again, this is one thing that it looks good in some scenes here, but in some of the close-ups, it's not as good, and that is the problem that you have. One thing CGI has really helped with is fire and water, because a lot of the time fire is always a full-size prop when it's real fire.
Yeah.
So the flames proportionally look wrong. They look fairly good here, but a friend of mine who's worked in production said the problem is that if you've got fire next to a miniature, it always looks wrong.
It doesn't scale well.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have to have it be large. Water's kind of similar. Maybe you can get away with water a little bit more so, but yeah, fire is very obvious when it's miniature.
I mean, and there are some very strong biblical kind of references here with the planet being Genesis, and the planet's almost we're seeing end of days as well here now, aren't we?
Yeah, yeah.
The apocalypse or the cataclysm.
Well, I think that must have been the reason why Shatner felt strongly about going all the way with that concept in the fifth one, to just straight up confront the notion of a god.
We're getting that wonderful score we're hearing as the planet pulls itself apart.
But yeah, once Jerry Goldsmith carries it for a while. Isn't Jerry Goldsmith doing the score for Star Trek like well into the?
No. He did some of the Next Generation. He did First Contact.
He did First Contact
with his son, with his son, who sadly passed as well.
Oh yeah, they're all gone. So sad.
Yeah.
It's weird when you watch movies like this because they've aged very well. It doesn't feel like I'm watching something that's 30, 40 years old. But yeah, some of the techniques that they used back then still hold up so well. You almost
they really do.
I think some filmmakers are trying to really lean back into practical. If you can kind of meld, what's possible with CGI and practical, you really get the best of both worlds. Yeah, I'm working on a project right now that requires a lot of matte paintings and creating a New Orleans facade for Los Angeles. So we're doing all these like French Quarter balconies on these shots. It's just a lot of work goes into these things. You don't realize that ultimately you don't even notice. So because that's the objective, is to make it believable. And
so here's the thing. What I'm noticing here with Kirk, I'm assuming it's Kirk compartmentalizing, or he's had enough time to be able to put the death of his son aside, because he seems to be classic Kirk again now. He's not worried. He's not worrying himself about his son's death. I'm assuming he's being quite private and he's just compartmentalizing it and not, he's just Kirking. It's probably the best way to describe it.
It's Kirking.
Yeah, he's Kirking. It's probably the best way to describe what he's doing. He doesn't seem impacted by his son's death.
I watched a special feature recently that interviewed the person who was building a lot of the props and costumes, jewelry for Star Trek.
Yeah.
And I think Sarah, Spock's father, that gown that he's wearing with all the jewels like embedded in the costume. Yeah. She was going into detail about how they built that and designed that. And again, you don't think about how much work goes into these things, but like that it's a beautiful set piece.
Yeah. Oh, it really is. And again, ILM doing some wonderful shots with the ship flying in and out the rocks on the planet. And this is an unusual thing that we're seeing here that the Klingon ship can do this, so the Federation ships to this point never really did, which is land inside the planet.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the first time in Star Trek we saw a full-size starship do a planetary landing would have been in Voyager.
Oh yeah, that's a good point.
Aside from maybe runabouts in Deep Space Nine, otherwise we didn't see a full-size ship do a planetary landing at all.
The planet of Vulcan has a very particular design aesthetic that they visited every now and again in the Star Trek series, but I've always wanted to see a story that takes place entirely on Vulcan and really explore like all the great sculptures and things that have been put in the backgrounds. And
Vulcan's always reminded me of kind of Rome, from sort of that kind of a cross between sort of Rome, Japan, sort of in kind of the imperial eras.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, the outfit on the guard with that large headpiece.
Yeah.
Just holding the staff. It's kind of a unique design compared to everybody else.
Carla just said, at age 87, and at her nephew's urging, Dame Judith Anderson accepted the ethereal role of Talar, a Vulcan high priestess who restores Spock's Katra to his body. Her true height was close to 4'8". To make Talar appear taller, they dressed her in an overlong hem and built up shoes combined with a crown that added 6 inches to her height.
Oh, wow. I love the double crystal on the head. That was a Japanese kind of quality to it.
Mad Matt says, logic out the window for all the ceremony. Costumes, jewelry, and Vulcan lipstick on display. They like a show on the Vulcan.
Is it a weird thing to say DeForest Kelly reminds me of my grandmother? So I got the same face. Yeah, these are all really cool shots.
They are.
Everything they did here really works well. And again, the whole movie is all about bringing Spock back. You know,
that's right.
That's the entire purpose of this film. And they do it, and I think they do it really well. And it's a beautiful setup for the fourth film, which is many people's favorites.
I like the fourth, but I don't like it as much as I used to. I think
maybe it didn't age as well.
I
Yeah,
think I love 80s stuff, obviously, but I think it's a little too Star Trek light in parts for me.
yeah, yeah. It's a movie for really the non Star Trek fan.
Yeah,
You could argue that the third of the Calvin is struggles with
yeah.
a similar problem.
It's the movie that you drag your partner who doesn't really like Star Trek too much, and
Right,
what
right.
you say is, you've taken them to see this, and then they're gone. I'm not seeing another Star Trek movie with you. And then you plead them to see that last one, and four's the one that you take them to.
But they earn it, because you love these characters so much.
Mm,
The fish out of water element, the timing of four, I think was
yeah.
really good, and uh, there's just something really fun about
Oh, it's a lot
that.
of fun. Don't get me wrong. It's really a lot of fun. Um, Mad Matt raises a really good point. How many have died for the one? A very cool poster. Don't get me wrong. I love Star Trek 4, but I don't know. It's Star Trek light. It's Star Trek for non-Star
Oh,
Trek
absolutely.
fans.
I know exactly what you're saying,
Hmm.
but
But
there's something about it.
now Mad Matt raises a really good point. How many people died for the one? Well, I don't know, Matt, because yes, there are a lot of Klingons died, but I suppose we'd regard them as expendable because they're all happy to die because they go to Sto-vo-kor. They died in battle, any of the Klingons who were killed. Um, the Grissom crew would have died irrespective of if Spock was rescued or not. So we can't blame. No, you can't, Sparky John. You see, you can't put the Grissom crew's death on the rescue of Spock because the Klingons would have destroyed them or not, whether the whole Spock thing was happening or not.
Cool
But the
moment
way
here.
Bones says that is almost as if like, yeah, I'm fine. Thanks for asking.
I also feel like where Leonard Nimoy was in his age and his
Yeah.
form in these particular movies was really some of his strongest Spock material.
Oh, definitely.
It's like his most iconic because it's something about him being a little older. Um, really helped, I think, his look. I mean, he was always such a great actor, and
Oh,
everything he
definitely.
did was such a strong voice. But yeah,
And
it
he had a
was
great sense of humor as well.
yeah, yeah.
For anyone who's not seen it, I really recommend an episode of Futurama called "Where No Fan Has Gone Before" because it is hysterically funny for any Star Trek fan.
Yeah. Yeah, someone sent me a video recently of a promotion for I think it was like Laserdisc,
Mm-hmm.
and it's hosted by Leonard Nimoy, and he's really trying to sell you on Laserdiscs.
I love laser. I have a Laserdisc player. It
I do
gathers
too.
dust. It gathers dust very nicely in my living room.
Yeah, well, there's like certain titles that you can only get on Laserdisc, or there's certain
Yeah,
features, and sometimes it's the cleanest presentation of certain titles because they never
yeah.
made a transfer beyond that era.
Embry, you're right. It's not a bad movie at all, and it does have some good character development. There just isn't much to it. It's really a quest. It's a quest movie.
Which one are you referring to?
This movie.
Yeah.
It's. I don't think it's only a bad one at all, and I think that's why 4 is great as well, because this is ultimately probably one of the darkest of all the Star Trek movies, in a lot of ways. And 4 is kind of your kind of palate cleanser, your reward for getting through 1 and 2, sorry, 2 and 3, which ultimately are quite dark and depressing in parts, and quite hard going. And that's where you get 4, which is kind of your popcorn, your dessert, your candy bar at the end of it.
Yes. Yeah, I would agree. But and they're all made better by experiencing them together, I think. If you can kind of manage the scope of the watch, it's 1 through 4, or 2 through 4 really are the continuous storylines.
I think if we go by the trope of the odd and even Star Trek movies, this is the best of the odd Star Trek movies.
Okay. Yeah, I could see that. Oh yeah, there's all the names of the actors who played Spock right there.
Yeah. There we go. Sparky Johnson, Star Trek 5 is the best. Star Trek 5 is not the best.
Star Trek 5 is far from the best.
It really is.
But I do love it. There's something about 5 has a lot of great iconic moments between the characters. Like the opening, I love the camping element and the mountain climbing stuff. It's really fun.
One thing I don't love about Star Trek 5 is the scale of the Enterprise. That's because they didn't use ILM for the effects. The scale of the ship is all over the shop.
Okay.
The Enterprise is absolutely giant, and its size changes because ILM kind of track the scale of the size of the ship, and they get it really wrong.
I've heard people compare it to like Superman 4, the way Superman 4 kind of like takes all the cool effect shots from the previous films and does them in a very lo-fi, lower budget kind of way. You don't notice it as much in 5.
Exactly. Apparently in Star Trek 5, the Enterprise had 500 decks at one point. And in the original script, Calbot, you're right, marshmelons with the marshmallow dispenser, which was the bizarre, one of the most bizarre sort of cash-ins and tie-in product placements ever, which there's a fantastic video by a channel called Junkball Media that speaks about this licensed craft marshmallow dispenser as the I'm surprised you don't have one in your collection, Lon. And I'm surprised when you know about it. If you remember in Star Trek 5, Spock pulls out a marshmallow dispenser.
Wow.
And it was actually Kraft sold it as a prop that would dispense 5 jet puffed marshmallows.
That's so stupid.
Yeah.
I'll have to seek that out.
It's bizarre stuff. But anyway, Lon, thank you for joining us today for Star Trek 3. The Search for Spock. We're not on 4 yet. But it's been so much fun today. Your closing thoughts on this movie, sum it up for us.
Oh, well, I would say that Star Trek 3 is an absolutely necessary film, and it's a wonderful bridge between 2 and 4. And to any newcomers to the Star Trek IP, I think it's a little intimidating for younger audiences that are coming into Star Trek because there's so much to consume. These movies are a really great place to start, I think, for any new coming fans to the Star Trek franchise. You can skip 1, but 2, 3, 4, I think are a great entry point.
Yeah, oh, definitely. But as Carl just said in the chat, this would be the last movie of our summer of popcorn. But don't worry, as the Star Trek 3 said at the end, the adventure continues, and we will be back with more watch parties. We're not going away. The next watch party will be Poltergeist 2 next week for In Search of Darkness, which I'm really looking forward to. That's a great, fun film. Yes. And then we will be back in 2 weeks with In Search of Tomorrow, with we're going to James Horner again. We're going back a little bit. We're doing Battle Beyond the Stars. We're carrying on with space music. So much fun. Oh, and that wonderful, wonderful Japanese poster there. If anyone hasn't seen Battle Beyond the Stars, please join us for that. It is so much fun, this movie. It's one of the best Roger Corman movies ever made. But
yeah, Corman stuff has aged beautifully. It's always well paced, and HD has been very kind to his inventory.
Yeah, exactly, Calvert. John Boy in Space, John Boy Walton in Space. It's just a wonderful, fun movie. Again, with a fantastic James Horner score, one of his first major scores, actually. So that's going to be a real treat. So, Lon, as we're just finishing off going through the credits at the moment, have you got anything you're working on at the moment? Anything you want to talk about? Anything?
I am on a project that's really interesting, but I have signed an NDA, so I can't talk too much about it, but it is exciting. It's the follow-up to a filmmaker who made a pretty incredible midnight movie, Impact, in recent years. So he's finally coming back to make another film, and I somehow, through connections, got involved in this project. And it involves New Orleans, it involves sharks, and that's all I can kind of say at this point. But it's very exciting to be a part of the team.
Well, that sounds wonderful. I'm really looking forward to that. Make sure of course, you'll be coming back, so you need to tell us about that when you're no longer under your NDA. Sharon's saying, I have not watched Battle Beyond the Stars. Oh, you will be watching it, and it is a wonderful, fun film. It's a really wonderful film. Mad Matt is saying, are we entering the autumn of candy corn watch parties? No, but there will be a new season coming up very soon. The title of it to be announced, but we will just be carrying on, not under a season for the next few weeks. As I say, we will be doing next week Poltergeist 2 for In Search of Darkness, and then Battle Beyond the Stars the week after for Sci-Fi. The other thing as well, for anyone who's a backer of the documentary, please be checking your email. We are having an exclusive backer event this week to reveal some information on In Search of Tomorrow. Please check your email about how to sign up for that, but it's purely for our backers. So that's going to be very exciting. We've got some big stuff planned. It's this Thursday. That's right, Sparky John, be this Thursday. So check your email if you haven't seen it. But everyone, stay safe, and we will see you in 1 week's time with Darkness. I'm back in 2 weeks with Sci-Fi. So bye-bye from me.
See you guys. Thanks so much for having me.